Good morning, Graham. Welcome. Good to see you. Um, Thanks to everyone for joining this morning. Really looking forward to this conversation. My name is Jake. I'm one of the co-founders here at Launch Notes, and really excited. I've been looking forward to chatting with the one and only Graham Reed of Product Ops infamy, and we're looking forward to this conversation today. You might have noticed we particularly or we specifically named this a roundtable and not a webinar. So if you're joining us live today, towards the end, if you'd like to hop in. We really want this to be a collaborative discussion, and we'd encourage you to hop in, ask questions, challenge our assumptions. If you have a hot take or question for Graham, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So towards the end, as we get to the Q&A section, please drop questions in throughout as you'd like, but also want to just open things up at the end and give people the opportunity to jump in and offer their perspective. So three quick housekeeping items before we get going. We just finished a new ebook we're really excited about. It's called The 10 Best Practices to Optimize Your Product Org, and we've collaborated with Graham on it. It's available for a free download at launchnotes.com/playbook. So head on over there. A lot of the conversation we're going to have today is going to revolve around the content in that ebook, but we released it about a month ago, and it's already had over 1,000 downloads. So I'm really excited about the traction. Would love for you to check it out. Hopefully it's valuable. Again, it's completely free. And hopefully it's something that you and your team can leverage as you think about how to implement product ops in your org. The second thing is, as I mentioned, we're going to be opening this up at the end. So please drop your questions in, but if you can, towards the end, stick around. And if you want to hop in and just join the conversation, we welcome it. So more on that as we get towards the end of the hour. And then finally, everything here is recorded. So we will be sending out an email afterwards with a recording of this. So if you have to come and go or leave early or have a hard stop at the hour and we go a little over, no worries. We will be following up with a full recording and a link to the ebook I just mentioned. So that's it. I'll shut up now and pull in Graham here. Graham, great to see you. Good evening. Welcome. And yeah, really looking forward to the discussion.
Looking forward to this as well, Jake. Thank you, and thank you firstly for having me on this, and also for all the work we've both done together on the book as well, which was a lot of fun to produce. A lot of great insights in there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking a bit more about it.
Amazing. One of these days we'll have to get together in person when you make it over to the States. I feel like we worked very closely on the book for about a month, and it occurred to me towards the end that we've never met in person. So we'll have to stop doing this on Zoom and have a beer when
We
you.
will absolutely have to do that for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, let's. I'm gonna open up the ebook here, and we'll explore a couple sections. But before we do, I selfishly I want to. There's something that I wanted to ask you, and kind of feel like it'd be a good way to kick off the conversation. And that is that I was at Atlassian for 7 years prior to leaving to start Launch Notes. And in those 7 years, we never had I never worked with a product ops person. We never had a product ops function there. We had technical program management, we had program managers, we had scrum masters. We had, I would say a very well-oiled machine in the product org, but no product ops department or sort of function. And I'm curious how you think about it. It seems to me anyway that like product ops sort of seemingly came out of nowhere and very quickly became, a very respected and important role, but it kind of it rose to prominence very quickly. So curious just to get your 2 cents on where the product ops role came from. Do you agree that it kind of came up very quickly? What's a little bit of the history or backstory in your view of how product ops came to be?
Yeah, certainly. And so there's always a really interesting kind of dynamic to this particular question, because if we separate product ops in terms of the function, the things that it typically looks after, things it's typically concerned with, from people and the role, then actually we understand that product ops and the things that it looks after have been here forever. In terms of just process and how a team works, a product team works, and they repeat the same sort of things over and over again. If you didn't have process in any way, shape, or form, there'd be utter chaos. If you didn't have a roadmap, if you didn't have all of the things that we take for granted in a product team, in a business, if we didn't have all of these very logistical elements, things just wouldn't function. So when you look deeply at this, product ops has always been here. But what we're starting to realize now over the past kind of 4 or 5 years is, do you know what? these were actually quite important things to get right, to refine, to get better at, to make sure that people were doing these things. And do you know what? Embedding habits into using good data, using process, using good communication methodologies. We're now looking at this and saying we should be doing this better. These are really actually quite fundamental and important things to running a business, running a product team. So let's get them right. And there's not enough time to do these things. Previously when we didn't have those dedicated product ops people, it was always on the side of a product leader's desk or working off the good graces of certain people within the product teams. And now we're seeing, do you know what? We give this to somebody or a small team, they can just run with it and we can get so much better, so much quicker, and let our product teams focus on what we really want them to be doing, which is building great products.
Love it. Would you say that product ops is kind of a spicy question? Product ops replaces another role that did exist or has existed, or is it something that sort of augments what's already there?
No, I think it really does augment what's already there. And look, there's absolutely no hard and fast rule to say, look, you've got to have a product ops person, a dedicated person to doing this. Yes, there are a lot of advantages to that, but what it does need is dedicated space. It does need dedicated resource. A person, even if it's part of their job, needs to be dedicated to that, so that actually it gets the right amount of time to look at, to research, to develop, to embed all of these new ways of working. Does it replace other roles? It doesn't replace, certainly. It complements, roles like Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, Agile practitioners, program managers. Probably the closest it comes to is a program manager, and I have absolutely seen these kind of these terms used interchangeably in businesses. A program manager in one business could quite easily be categorized product operations and vice versa, and I think that's okay. I wouldn't say it goes up against agile coaches. It doesn't go up against Scrum Masters. They have real dedicated focuses, particularly within the tech division of the business, where product operations looks much more holistically, maybe even with a slightly lighter touch across the entire business, particularly within a software business, such as Atlassian, for example.
Fantastic. Okay. Something that I know we touch on quite a bit in the ebook, but it's probably the question that is nearest and dearest to us here at Launch Notes, or at least that we get the most. We work with hundreds of product leaders that use our software, is when we talk about bringing more operational efficiency into the product org. There's always this kind of, the question behind the question is it time for me to start building out a product ops org, or is it time for me to start thinking about this as a dedicated function? For a lot of the companies, either haven't built out a product ops org before or don't have one, obviously. I'm curious how you think about and have thought about with the companies that you've worked with. How do you know as a product leader that it is time to start investing in product ops? Both, maybe a two-part question, as a function and then as a dedicated role or team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And as I said earlier, there's no hard and fast rule to this at all. Some businesses will, embrace kind of those product ops principles much earlier in their journey. Others more likely will have kind of found that there are these gaps appearing when they're a much larger business, and are now looking to say, look, we need to have efficiency in place. And do you know what? With what's been happening in the world recently, there's great call for that. We've been rapidly downsized in so many tech businesses, but the business still needs to run. The businesses are not downsizing in terms of their ambition, in terms of their revenue, in line with those numbers. We still want to be delivering the same. So actually now we need to be thinking about how can we be more lean, more efficient. And we're now starting to understand these gaps, and product operations is there to say, look, we can really do something here. We can genuinely make your lives better and more efficient. But it's a great point again, we're splitting out the function from the role. The function, has always been there. And so conceptually, we can start to be putting some of these processes and these ideas into place a lot earlier, before actually we need to maybe even assign anybody even part-time to this, there are small things that we can do, particularly as product leaders, to kind of go, look, let's just tweak this, let's help this along, let's have a slightly different way of thinking. Particularly when we're talking about a piece that we will come on to, kind of how we embrace so much more asynchronous work and asynchronous communication. Even if you're not a distributed business, we can actually take some of those practices and still apply them for the efficiencies that they bring. When do you know it's time? Ultimately, you will know that you need to do something, particularly when you start to kind of notice your teams are operating potentially quite differently, your product teams, particularly when the output from those teams, if you imagine kind of your teams and your squads, anything that comes out and you look one level above of those teams, that's the sort of thing that the rest of the business, they want standardization, they want quality, they want reliability. So if we just look at communications, for example, are all the teams doing it kind of regularly? Let's say they're doing it every week, every 2 weeks, whatever. Are they using the same amount of technical input? Are they, ultimately, are the length of the communications more or less the same? This sort of standardization is something that's quite key. It's not for the product teams themselves, it's for the wider business. The wider business fundamentally does not care that you've got 1 squad, 2 squads, 50 squads, and they all do different things. They care about, I need to sell this, I need to market this, I need to support this, and they don't care where it comes from. So it can become a very, very disjointed, it is a very disjointed experience. And I have absolutely seen this, where you've got some teams that just put out a bunch of release notes, that are basically copied out of Jira, and then you've got others that are chapter and verse about the benefits that this brings. That disjointed approach makes people very uneasy. It makes it a very difficult relationship to maintain between the technical side of the business and the commercial side of the business. And so, to come back, when do you start to know that this is an important thing to invest in? When you start noticing that, when your wider business, particularly commercial side of the business, starts to realize, look, I don't know whether I'm coming or going with your product team, with your tech side of the business. Those are some of the telltale signs for sure.
Got it. And digging a little deeper on that, if a product org and a product leader is looking to sort of start down that road, down that process, let's say they don't have, as many companies don't right now, they're not going to have necessarily salary for a headcount this quarter or even the next 6 months, but you want to start putting some of those processes in place. Again, something we talk a lot about in the ebook is just the difference between putting the processes in place and the dedicated role. Like, what are some of the kind of ABCs or the first few things that you recommend or have worked with product teams to do? Say, let's start putting the product ops function in place. Let's start putting some processes in place without jumping in necessarily feet first to the deep end. What does that look like, especially again in today's world where everyone's trying to do a lot more with a lot less?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 key starting points here. Is firstly, identifying the scale of the problem that you're looking to deal with. Like any good product manager, what's the problem? Let's go and do some investigation on this. So from a product ops perspective, let's start to note down and understand what these problems are on the scale of those, and they will be very, very different depending on the size of the business. And I'm not sitting here and turning around and saying, look, you've got 2 product managers, and do you know what, they're communicating ever so slightly differently, or maybe very differently. Okay, but look, you've got 2. There's firstly the effort to try and standardize across both of those is not going to be very great, and probably the size of your business that then scales with that is probably not as big an issue to work on, whereas other parts of what product operations usually focuses in on may be greater. But obviously you need to assess what you're looking to go after. What's that low-hanging fruit that you can you can attack right away, you can solve, you can help and improve. And then secondly as well, identify what resources you've got internally, and forgive me, the term resources, we are talking people. I typically don't like to use that term, but ultimately, who have you got available that you can point towards this? So have you got program managers internally that can take some of this work on, whether it be temporarily or permanently? Have you got some good, experienced product managers, maybe seniors, maybe leads, maybe staff product managers, those that are probably less in the weeds day to day, have maybe a little bit more capacity to start focusing on some of this, and with the right amount of experience to know how to implement some of these new elements. Could also be product leaders as well that can take some of that work on. But of course, this has to be balanced with how much work they've already got on their plate, because ultimately that's the reason why product ops exists. Is most of the time there isn't the capacity internally to really focus down on this with the existing staff. So it's a real it's a real balancing act between what you want to achieve and what resources have you then got available. But starting slow, starting to make small improvements, because again, ultimately, even if you do employ a product ops person, that's still the way that they will approach this. Probably is to say, what are the small iterations that we can make? What are the small changes, the small tweaks, as we start to build trust of the changes that we're building within the business, something else we'll talk about later. And then we iterate up, we do more, we improve more. It's still the same process, or it should still be the same process. Now you're just looking at who can go on and implement that for you.
Absolutely. Okay. That's great. And I think it's a very nice segue into the next thing we wanted to chat about. We're going to give people a little teaser of the product ops playbook here. But you have a lot of the foundation of what we discuss in the ebook is around these sort of 6 pillars. And so I thought it might be good to take some time and kind of unpack each one, again, without giving away too much, but give you time to walk through each pillar, talk a little bit about its importance in kind of the overall framework and structure of a product ops org. And then in the spirit of having this ebook be something that's very actionable for people, perhaps if you have some examples or some anecdotes, Graham, because you spent a lot of time doing this over the last few years, it'd be great just to give some very practical examples of each one and how they can be implemented and the importance. So I will turn it back over to you to kind of walk through your 6 pillars.
Yeah, certainly. So right at the very top, and in actual fact, if you imagine this turned kind of almost sideways, these are almost canonical in terms of kind of the higher and more detailed that they are. So the first is a strategic support, and it's quite vague, almost deliberately so, in that product operations is there to support ultimately the entire strategic operation of predominantly the product, the tech side of the business, ultimately the whole business as well. So how do they do their kind of their strategic planning, their quarterly, their annual reviews, and the logistics that go into all of that? How do they make sure that the software that they have and use is good, is suitable, is fit for purpose, and is also being used well, is being used to its fullest as well? A lot of what we do in product operations is very much focused on that kind of very logistical side of things. It doesn't matter actually really what it is. It's physically getting in and doing and providing and just making sure that the right people are in the right place to have the right conversations, make the right decisions, and have the right information that they can take away. So in terms of strategic support, we're looking at how do we build that strategy for the product and in some cases the business as well, and what needs to go into that. So again, it's pulling the right people together. It's ensuring that things that are pre-reading, for example, as we're coming into quarterly annual reviews, have they got things like the data that they need? Have they got the roadmap of that's already planned, the changes that they're wanting to do? Product operations is not responsible for producing majority of that, but they will be responsible for making sure that actually does everybody have what they need, and making sure that they come ready and prepared to those events. Into business alignment, so making sure that actually we are continuing to serve the business. What does the business need? Not just necessarily what product wants to do and deliver and build. Is there alignment to the business goals? And is this clear on things like roadmaps, in discussions, in product demos for the business? And making sure that the business understands how what we're doing is aligned to those business goals. So you've got your leadership across the entire business, regardless of what it is you're doing, and they will be singing and praising whatever it is the business is there for. And product is supporting that. And we need to make sure that we're reminding both the rest of the business and the product teams themselves of why we're here and what we're trying to achieve, that we're not off building something that just has no implication for those business goals. It's not going to drive big revenue. And sometimes as well, this means being an advocate for those other departments and what their needs are. And this means, keeping abreast of what their plans are, what initiatives are they going after. So in terms of sales, have they got a new strategy for sales? Have marketing got a big new marketing piece that they're going after? Product needs to be aware of that. It's not necessarily for the product division, the tech division, to say, no, we shouldn't be doing that, because hopefully those sorts of discussions have been had, but reminding the product team of, look, we need to be aligning to this. It could be as simple as delaying a release for a period of time while this happens, or it could well be making sure the right advertisements are being placed into the product, etc., etc. Data-informed decision-making. I mean, I go on about this horrendous amounts. If you've ever seen me talk before, making sure, firstly, that that there is data available. So this is data dashboards in Looker, Power BI, Tableau, whatever. That it is correct, it is up to date, it is providing the right sort of analytics and insights that predominantly the product and the tech side of the business needs. Fairly simple. But also making sure that the product teams, again in particular, are using it. It's not just being paid lip service. It's not, we've got these dashboards, that's fantastic, I'll look at them once every 6 months and I've done my job. It's actually embedding into those teams. You should be looking at this regularly. You should be basing, at least in part, your decisions upon what that data is telling you. Not in entirety, we're not being data driven, but we're being informed by this. Does the data support or go against the direction that we're going? And that's fine. And for product operations, sometimes this will mean as well that we are sitting in meetings, in strategy meetings, and we'll be piping up and saying, have we looked at the data for this? Does the data support this? If it does, that's fine. I'll sit back down, I'll go back into my box. And if you haven't, to be honest, that's okay as well. But it's certainly something we should be doing. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Look, we've that's another, if they turn around and say, yeah, we've forgotten it on this occasion, that's okay. I'm not your teacher, I'm not your parents, but ultimately this is what we are doing. This is what we should be doing, and making sure that we are following those rules. And by doing this, we are now starting to embed a new habit into those teams, making sure that this is a fundamental part of how they strategize. Product alignment, fairly simple. Making sure that we are making sure the roadmaps are being reviewed, that we're circulating those changes, the reasons for those changes. We're making sure that the information that's going out is consumable by the rest of the business. Is it in sync with the rest of the business as well? Ultimately bringing product, and by virtue of the rest of the tech side of the business as well, in line with the commercial side, so they know what we're doing, they understand it, they can consume it. And actually this is a big part of communications as well. The fifth is iterative improvement. Okay, look, this is really nuts and bolts of the processes that we do, that we put in place. How do those teams communicate? How do we get feedback into the teams from the rest of the business? How do we do product discovery? And making sure that we are iterating upon these processes, that we are improving them, that we are, have a plan, going forward, that the teams are aware, that the teams are happy, that the teams are getting on with those improvements, or understanding those improvements as well, and as well across the business. We do want to be very little and often. We don't want as very, very few big bang approaches to this, because it comes back once again. So much of what we do in product operations is about improvements, it's change management, it's embedding new behaviors, it's new processes, new habits into our colleagues. It's actually so little to do with the tech, with data, with communications. Actually, at its core, it's about embedding and managing change in our colleagues to do things differently in a way that's not disruptive to them. And so this actually is such an important and critical part of everything that we do in product ops. And finally, collaboration, cross-functional collaboration. So, aligning what we do across the teams. And something I mentioned earlier as well, just very briefly, understanding where it is important to have that alignment. Mm-hmm. Inside those teams, those squads, actually, we might not care too much. We might not focus too much on how that product manager and that design manager and that engineering lead, that product marketer, that small squad, how they're interacting with each other. It's possibly not as important, certainly straight away, as it is when you come one level up and outside that. So if you've got your 20 squads, actually all of those 20 squads, if they're all operating ever slightly differently or maybe quite differently, it's a thing, but it's not going to be top of my list of things to try and solve. What is much more important is everything that comes out of those teams and goes out to the wider business. If they are all different, that's a big problem. That misalignment between those teams, where the commercial side of the business is then receiving updates sporadically from some teams, almost daily from others. Some teams are putting their list of Jira tickets as a product update on one. Others are chapter and verse about all the value of all of this. This is incredibly disjointed for the commercial team. The commercial team probably doesn't care that you've got one team, two teams, 20 teams all delivering. They just want the information. And so that very disjointed approach looks quite unprofessional. It's very difficult to consume. It's very difficult to rely upon. It's very difficult to trust. And so that is where that collaboration and that alignment is much more important. I'll stop there because I've just done a lot of talking.
No, that's terrific. I appreciate you taking us through those. Two follow-up questions I have for you. One is, how does a product ops person think about, you obviously want each individual team to be optimized for, their best practices, their most efficient output and work. But as you highlighted very nicely going through these, a huge part of the role is making sure there's consistency across. So where is there, I'm not sure if there's a specific example you could give, but where is it sort of like where is the line between making sure each team has what they need individually, which might be different team to team, but there's also, for the sake of the business and all the alignment, there is consistency for the business across the entire org. How do you think about that?
I think firstly, it's very different in every single business. If we remember, actually, if we come back to, so much of product operations is about change, improvement, embedding habits, things like that. This is very, very personal. This is all a lot of this is also based on personalities as well, which is everybody is different. So you can walk into one business, you can work for one business, and actually you'll have a team of individuals who are super, super aligned, really up for improvements, efficiencies, automation, change, and it will come with its own challenges, but actually much more amenable to kind of just mucking in and getting on. To other businesses whereby actually they're very resistant to change, and actually that takes a very different approach. So it's different every single time, and it's about understanding who you're working with, the appetite for change there, and that will then also help to point towards how much change is needed, or improvement or alignment is needed within those teams themselves. There's When you're looking at kind of that alignment for the sake of the rest of the business, it's a much easier pill to swallow to say, look, we really do need to be doing this, because actually it's not you, it's them. We need to be supporting the rest of the business.
Yeah.
When we're then actually talking about within those teams themselves, improving the ways that they work, or conversely, making sure that they still have the right amount of freedom to explore and develop how they want to. Again, that's very much dependent on the business and the individuals involved. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, other than I feel like over the last 2 years, product operations has moved very much from just getting product working better, or by extension, the tech side of the business, to really now focusing on what is best for the whole business. And what comes with that is that understanding, that focus, that we probably do need to be better aligned. We do need some more guardrails to help us, making sure that we are one team, we are appearing as one team out to the rest of the business, and making sure we have that trust, we have that alignment, we have that what's the word? Just generally that trust in the, from the rest of the business, that we are here and we are professional in what we're doing.
Got it. That's great. Okay. My second question is around, I think kind of asking you to stack rank these would probably be futile, because there's a reason why they are the 6 pillars that hold up the function in your view, like really what a high efficiency product ops function looks like. But in your experience, I'm curious, are there some of these that you think people tend to struggle with more than others, or potentially even put off more than others? Are there some of these that you when you come in, you evaluate a little bit differently than you might, data informed decision making is something that I'm going to do 6 months in, versus iterative improvement, something I need to do kind of day one? Or how do you think about these? I'm putting myself again in the shoes of someone that's trying to start or expand and improve their product ops function. How would you sort of think about these, maybe in terms of timing or cadence?
I mean, I'll come back to my same answer. I think predominantly very much depends on the individual business. But, if I was to stick my neck out, I would say, yes, look, typically, the data is something that can kind of be pushed back a little bit, mostly because in my experience, that tends to need a bit of an overhaul. Unless you've been really on top of kind of having fantastic dashboards, really great data analysis, maybe you've got teams that are already doing all of that. It either needs a lot of work, or probably doesn't need much at all. I would say as well, things that need more practical implementation of process, just a way of doing things, rather than having to really embed change, new ways of working that are really ingrained into particularly how product managers work. Those are easier to do. Those are, when we talk about quick wins, when we talk about low hanging fruit, we're talking about what things can we do and implement that will make a material difference to people, not just on the product, but around the business. And we do that because that starts to build the trust with what we are doing in product operations. We need that trust, because when we come to do bigger things down the road, we need that trust, we need that help, we need that support. If we walk in and say, right, do you know what, we're going to completely overhaul all of our dashboards, we're going to start afresh, we're going to focus a huge amount of time and effort and potentially resource on all of this, and we're going to be super on this from day one. Well, okay, but how long is that going to take? Oh, it's going to take probably a couple of months to really, really do well. Right. Okay, so in all that time, I'm not doing anything else. We're not seeing any improvements. We're not seeing any return on the investment that we're putting into product operations. So that's a way that I would look at it, is to say, what are the things that we can do that need improvement in a particular business, they will typically be smaller processes. They will typically be things around, in my experience, things like how we're getting feedback into the teams. How maybe are we doing discovery right now that could be improved upon? How are we doing our release notes? How are we holding meetings, things like demo sessions and things like that with the rest of the business? And actually, how could they be more useful? We're not implementing anything new. We're just refining what we've already got. And we're then starting to see those improvements, and the cumulative improvement that we see from all of those small changes then becomes something that we can measure ourselves against.
Got it. I love it. I'm trying to keep us honest here with time. Looks like we're already 38 minutes past. Where has the hour gone? There's one more area I want to jump to quickly, Graham, before we move to Q&A. And again, I'm just a little teaser here for the 10 best practices that you can grab when you download the ebook. But I want to focus in specifically on this first one, and I think there is a reason why you wanted to put this first, and it's this whole concept of audience-led communication, which is something, of course, again, it's very near and dear to our heart here at Launch Notes as well. But I would just love for you to expand a little bit on what is audience-led communication, why is it important to the product ops function, and why did you want this to be kind of the first of the best practices that we highlighted?
So, in short, audience-led communications is the idea that actually we focus upon our communications, but the sorts of things coming out of the product team, product updates, roadmap updates, things like that. We focus the content on what people around the business need or want to hear, not what we want to tell them. And there's a difference. So a very simple example. We've got an update that's going out. We've got our release notes, and it's a bundle of things some things that are technical, some things that are non-technical, some bug fixes, some just general updates. From all of that, sales team care probably about 30% of that. Marketing team, probably about the same. The support team, the delivery teams, they probably care a lot more about a lot more of that, but almost the other side of things. They want to care about the things that actually impact our customers now that we've already got, the bug fixes. If you send all of this out as it is, you run the risk that there's information overload for people that just don't want it, can't understand it. And in a very similar vein as well, looking at the technical level of those updates as well. I'll give you a great example. A business I worked at last year, one of the very first product updates when they put out when I first started there was written by the engineering team as well, which was fantastic. And they one of these updates was that they removed something like 4,000 lines of code from a particular page, which was a great achievement. Really, absolutely worth celebrating.
Sure.
It made the page 2% or 2 seconds quicker to load than it was before. And what can sales do with that? What can marketing do with that? Actually, what can anybody around the business fundamentally do with that information other than applaud it? And that's great. So actually, we need to think about what does the audience need to hear? And sometimes as well, this means, and put this into practice, that we actually provide different updates to different people, different teams. I'm not advocating that in every case. There's different ways of approaching this. But let's think about what the sales team need. What do they need to hear about? And actually, how do we present that to them? It may well be that we present the same update to them, but presented with different language. A process that I implemented very successfully is a 3-step process, which was every update had a problem, the problem we were solving, the solution that we put out, and why is it awesome? What was the value behind this? And that why is it awesome piece was so important because the sales team were predominantly only looking at that. They went, here's the title. Okay, that's what we did. Why is this awesome? Fantastic. I've got a soundbite. I can go and take to my customers. We can put out in a marketing release. This is the value that we are now bringing to our customers.
Yes.
This is audience-led communication, focusing on what do they need, not what we want to tell them, and augmenting what they need to hear based upon the information that we have available to them.
Fantastic. Yes, I was prepping for this our conversation today. I pulled out this quote from the ebook of yours from when I first interviewed you, which is the quote is the era of single solitary static release notes page languishing in a forgotten corner of your website is long gone, as is the assumption that everyone within the organization knows the product as intricately as the product teams do, bugs and all. But I think that captures it very well. And again, from a lot of the product teams that we work with is exactly the approach they're trying to take. It's no longer a one and done, especially in the asynchronous world in which we're working, and things are shipping and the product is changing while some people are asleep. And making sure that you have that alignment is more than just kind of spraying something out into the ether and saying, here's what happened. But as you say, tailoring it for the specific audience so they can immediately consume it and then use it to back to your 6 pillars, actually move things forward for the business.
And if you think just one moment on that as well, that we're in a world now, but whereby everything has to have a value to it. We have to be providing value. Otherwise, what's the point? So in this context, if we're putting out an update that, do you know what kind of hits the mark with some people, it hits a little bit of value with everybody, that's not good enough. We could be maximizing the value and the impact that our updates do, literally just by changing the tone, the language that we use, the level of technical input, or in some cases, giving different teams, slightly different information based upon their needs. And that's really maximizing the value of that one process, that one output.
Fantastic. Well, again, this is the first of 10 best practices that we outline with Graham. So grab a copy of the ebook at launchnotes.com/playbook, and you can explore all 10. We're at about the 45-minute mark. I have one more question for you, Graham, and then we'll open it for some Q&A. And we've had a couple questions come in. Again, I know some folks have come in as we've been having our conversation. We did specifically call this a roundtable. We're hoping at the end, if you can stick around and you want to just unmute yourself and kind of hop in, we'd love to have you as part of the conversation. So we've never done this before, but we'll see how it goes. My question here, my final question here, Graham, is if you think about the 6 pillars that we walked through, if let's say you're implementing some or all of the 10 best practices, to your earlier point, these days everything needs to be measured, and so I'm curious to get your thoughts on if again, for those folks that are trying to build and or optimize their product ops org, what does success look like, and sort of how is it measured? At the end of a month or a quarter, or year of end review, as you look back on your activities and everything that you put into place in the product ops org, what are the the metrics that matter? What are the things that you would look to say, yes, we've had a really successful year within the product ops function?
I think there are 2 sides to this. There are some real simple, I'll say simple, but common business metrics that product ops can absolutely have a hand in. It becomes quite difficult to quantify that quantification, if you wouldn't know what I mean. How much did product ops help on that? So some examples, and we've got this in the book. Have we reduced customer churn rate? Have we increased recurring revenue? Have we increased customer acquisition costs? Or sorry, reduced customer acquisition costs? Have we improved the utilization of our platform? Have we increased things like upsells, things like that? Product operations can help with all of those things, absolutely. Just in the same way that product will, engineering will, design will, the rest of the business will do as well. How do we help that? Well, things like we can make sure that we're looking at the data to help us identify where we can be reducing churn. When the company I was at last year, we were halfway through a project, and when unfortunately I was then made redundant from that company, along with many others, whereby we were looking at predictive analysis. We were trying to see if we could understand and predict where customers were churning based upon the amount that they use the platform or other key indicators. We were doing really well with that. There were some interesting trends that we were coming out with that. That would have, if we pushed it out properly, would have really resulted in genuine ways that we can identify and improve the customer journey, the reduce on churn, etc., etc. So fundamental, really measurable ways that we can do that. So that's one side of it, is what we can do to help the business. How do we measure ourselves in product operations? This is much more internally. This is, and always has been, very, very difficult. It really has been. Earlier in the year, I did a whole bunch of research on how we measure ourselves. And I've come up with a bit of a matrix on how we can do this. The short of it is that we survey internally regularly. Because how do you genuinely measure how happy your team are, how promotional they are of what you're doing, how satisfied with your work are they? Actually, these are all very emotive things, not very quantifiable at all. So the best way that we've got this is to do surveys. The survey that I've created is a mixture of NPS and CSAT, customer satisfaction scores, because ultimately our customers in product operations are internal colleagues, product managers, the rest of the business. And essentially you ask 4 fundamental questions across each of the pillars that we've already identified. So for example, how satisfied are you with the value that we are bringing to collaboration and communication? Or words to that effect. Doesn't have to be worded exactly like that. How promotional are you of the strategic support that we are giving to you, to the teams, to the business? And we come back with those scores. And if we do that every 6 months, we've got something that we can measure. Mm-hmm. And hopefully people are more satisfied. And whenever I've done this, actually you start off at a baseline, and that's so incredibly important to make sure that you do that very early on in your tenure. Get that baseline, and then you've got something to say, look, all this effort I've put in over the last 6 months, is this working for people? And guarantee the first time round you will have a big uptick, and then it will plateau, and then you've got to find more creative ways of trying to help these people around the business. But you will certainly notice a big uptick just through those small and cumulative changes that you're making.
Fantastic. I love it. You can't move what you don't measure. So even if it's surveys, the measurement and getting it in a quantifiable form is so key. All right. This has been great, Graham. I think with the 10 minutes, and I think we might go a few minutes over. Anyone is welcome to stick around if you can. For Q&A, but let's take at least the last 10 minutes to answer a couple questions. A few have come in here, but I want to kick things off with one that we were chatting about just before we went on air, and that is what is, looking into Graham's crystal ball. I think everyone in both in product as well as product ops is thinking about the year ahead. They're looking at the rest of 2024 into 2025. The last few years have been very tumultuous in the software industry, and I'm just curious. I know you do a lot of thinking about this, a lot of conversation and writing, and you're very active in the industry. So I'm curious just to get your pulse on what is the next 12 months hold for the product operations function.
Yeah, I think firstly, product ops has proven itself. I think we've been on a journey of fighting against the tide, fighting against the wind a little bit from naysayers to say, actually, is this doing, is this worth doing? Is this even needed? Quite often conversations to say, actually, do you know what? If you need product operations, you're basically admitting that you've failed as a product leader. Complete rubbish, absolute complete rubbish. Actually, that shows me a really great sign you're a very considered leader to say, look, I recognize where we've got some gaps. And do you know what? Those gaps are not anybody's fault. They are gaps because you're growing as a business, that actually you're focused. You want to have your teams focused on the things you really employ them for, building those great products, and not on this logistical tangle that sits behind everything that has to sit there.
Yes.
I feel product ops has proven itself now in this juncture in 2024. We're seeing many more roles open up for this. We're seeing new roles open in businesses that have never done this before.
Hmm.
And it is actually spot on with what I would consider product ops as well. I think we also went through this time of people calling it product ops when actually it was either a catch-all for very junior product work, or it was more project manager, just under a nice cool name. We really have kind of solidified what product ops should be and the value that it and ultimately the outcomes people want it to achieve. I think businesses are now turning around and saying, okay, we get it. Product ops is a thing, it's here to stay, and people are raving about it. It's really having tangible value. Now they're asking, what can it do for me? We are seeing, I say, more roles opening up. I think this is also going to happen as well with the expansion of businesses again, tech businesses. Now they're taking on many more product managers, tech teams. We've gone through that depression of the teams. Now we're starting slowly to open back up again. And that absolutely will be the sign whereby actually product ops can come in and so you don't have to go back to the lofty heights you were before of having 50 product people. Do you know what? You could probably do it with 25 if we are more efficient of
Yeah.
how we work. If you have those product people focused on building the products, not the logistical stuff around the side. So as we're building, it's almost like we can rebuild more efficiently. We had a go. No, I wouldn't say we had a go, but we've gone where we were. We've had to scale back down. Now, as we're scaling back up again, let's be more considered with it.
Yes.
It's absolutely going to be a springboard for accelerating that productivity, that delivery. I've written, I think, 2 articles now whereby actually product ops pays for itself. Actually, the salary
Yep.
is actually more than pays for itself in terms of the time saving that you take away from those other product managers. What I'm also seeing as well, which is really nice, is where particularly startups, they're not taking on, and I'm absolutely not advocating they should be taking on product ops people. They are embedding some of those good principles from very early doors. They're either pushing back on that need for a while for product ops, or having those great processes in place already,
Great.
which makes the job so much easier when they do want to employ them. And you know what? It's making their teams more efficient at the same time. It's not doing everything, but it's doing something. It's putting the idea about let's be considered. Let's think about what we're doing. Let's see what efficiencies we can put in as we're trying out new stuff. That's fantastic that we're at least thinking about the principles at this very early stage.
Yeah. The crawl, walk, run approach. You can't walk or run unless you start crawling, and it seems like you're seeing companies doing that earlier and earlier, which is terrific. And I would say it's definitely a trend that we're seeing as well, which is great. Companies very interested in getting involved and making, mainly just because of, I would say honestly, the macroeconomic climate. Companies are having to do a lot more with a lot less, even right from the
Yeah.
get-go, which is it's unfortunate in a lot of ways, but it's also it's the theory of constraints in some ways, where it's like, guys, we just got to do more with less. So how are we going to do that? And they're being forced to think about that early on. Another question we got here is, which is AI top of mind. How do you see AI, or has AI impacted product ops, and how do you see AI potentially impacting it moving forward?
I think that there's no question AI is impacting on everything
Hmm.
right now. And long term, do you know what? It may do enough to stave off the need for a product ops person or many product ops people. Just by being able to do some of the principles, so have on-demand information. We're already starting to see this whereby, businesses have AI. I think it was Klarna, I think this week said that they're getting rid of Salesforce, they're getting rid of another product as well,
That.
Workday, because actually they've embedded AI in, so they can just go and find the information they want just by going and asking AI. Okay, fantastic, brilliant, great, fantastic. So part of that in kind of having the idea of having a product hub on demand information, things like that. Yeah, okay. Once that's set up and working and all lovely and things like that, less of a need. But actually, how are you going to help and support those individuals that are still there in the business in just the logistics of the meetings and making sure everyone's done the pre-read and everything else like that. It's not about the actual process of getting data and putting things together. Yeah, AI can do all of that.
Yep.
But we still have that same fundamental problem of people and embedding new habits, new ways of working into those people to be more efficient, to be actually making better use of that AI. We've got a long journey to embedding these new ways of thinking and using AI into these people, and that's going to take time. So AI is going to do a lot, absolutely, but it's never. I don't feel it's ever going to be able to replace that idea. I don't think until you've got a generation change of professionals that have grown up and have had AI just embedded into their own lives, will they then be able to kind of walk into a business and kind of go, fantastic, all I've got to do is ask AI to go and do X, Y, and Z for me, and do you know what, half my job's done. It's going to be a long, long time before actually that way of thinking has changed in business.
Couldn't agree more. And I think so many people are looking at AI the same way they've looked at software for many years, in which case let's just throw AI or throw software at the problem when really it's a cultural problem or it's a people problem or it's a scale problem. And it's not always software, right? Software is there to augment, but as you say, you still need very competent people with a good strategy and coming to work every day, bringing folks together and making sure that everyone is aligned and doing all those things. And that's not something that can be easily replaced by a single piece of software or ChatGPT or Claude,
Yeah.
as it were. So, Adam, I see you have a raised hand here. Do you want to hop in and ask Graham your burning question?
Yeah, Graham, thank you so much for this webinar. You mentioned people, and I just wonder, like, what is your approach and philosophy of dealing with the different operation type of managers? So there's engineering ops, there's marketing ops, there's operation managers that are helping those individual teams, and how do you avoid, a blurring of lines of responsibilities and work really effectively with those different operation managers of those different teams?
That's a great question. I don't think you do, actually. I think there is a lot of natural overlap. And something that I've seen, or I've read about, sorry, let me rephrase, I've not actually seen it done in practice, but I've seen a lot of talk about exactly this, whereby you've got these different ops roles around particularly larger businesses. And actually what they have or what they become is a community of practice themselves. So they almost become a dotted line department of their own, as well as wherever they are, already situated, so that they themselves can share best practice on how we are working across, in all areas of the business, and particularly where there's commonality. So in terms of providing feedback, across the board, how are we using data? Data is a great one. Fundamentally, data shouldn't be different, but I've seen this in businesses whereby actually one team is using one dashboard using exactly the same data under the hood. Another team is using another one, just slightly augmented. It's giving completely different outputs, different views on what we should be doing. All right, that's crazy. What we should be doing is making sure that these things are aligned so that we're providing that same story, that same narrative, regardless of where you are in the business or where there is a difference. We understand why there is a difference there. We don't have this siloed approach. And it's that idea of not having a siloed approach to process, not having a siloed approach to communication and collaboration, which is that key thing. Each of those ops people have a different, let's call it allegiance for the moment, sales ops, rev ops, finance ops, they have a focus. They are trying to make sure the business is equipped for everything that they need in terms of finance and in interacting with the finance team. Fantastic. Basically the same as what product ops does. And if you do, and so that's fine. What we just need to make sure is that we're aligned on that and that we can sing and support their aims and goals as well across the business. They are not going to be involved in, well, actually products should be taking feedback in this way. Fundamentally, again, they don't care, about how we're doing that. But what we do care about is, are we aligned on this? Are we putting these forms in the same place? Is it easily accessible? Have we got the same kind of interface for our product hubs or whatever we want to call them? Making sure that there is that consistent approach. If those ops teams are the logistics under the hood, and the front of house staff, your sales, your marketing, your product, your engineers, those people on the front lines, they just want to come in and do their primary role. And to be supported in doing that, we want that consistent under the hood framework, that logistical side of things. And that's where that idea of a community of practice across all of the ops teams really, really does work well.
All right, we are at time, but there's 2 more questions, Graham. If you've
Go for it.
another 10. This one is I'm interested in your answer to this one. What's the single biggest pitfall you've seen as companies are implementing product ops for the first time?
I think going too big too quick. Quite simply. I've talked already about kind of building trust through simple iterations, low-hanging fruit. So I think going too big too quick can be a difficulty. With the right support, particularly from leadership across the business, it's absolutely fine to do. If there is that real burning need, let's just say super poor on data usage. I come in and they go, we already know that it's a big problem. We need to really sort this first. Okay, great. Give me the support. Build the teams up so that they know this is coming. Give me that support to roll this out how we need to do it. Fine, we can do that. But otherwise, going too big too quick, you run the risk of not having that trust built up. You don't have that buy-in from the other teams, particularly outside of product, where your main base is where you interact most. Again, not looking at any one team in particular, but say sales. We're going to ask them to kind of start using feedback forms and things like that, where they've never done that before. They're used to just being super simple and just typing something into Slack and away they go. So all of a sudden they're going to go, well, why should I do this? What's the point? No one's making me. It can be a bit of a problem. Almost directly aligned to that as well, not necessarily on the individuals that are running product operations, but actually leadership in the business. It's vital, critical. I don't know how I make that even bigger word, but it's absolutely critical that the leadership is behind this. Having leadership support to say, look, product ops is here. This is their remit. This is what they're coming in to do. This is the value that they're going to bring. Give them your support. If you don't have that support, and ongoing as well, not just a lip service that, on your first day, but actually ongoing. When you've got pushback, actually you've got a process that you're rolling out, or you're doing something, and it's all been agreed, it's all been planned, everyone's very excited about it, and then all of a sudden you've got people saying, I'm just not going to do it. It's wasting my time. It's too much effort. I don't want to change. I don't like this. And then all of a sudden management are like, yeah, we don't want to upset them. Let's just not do that now. It's already a failure because, unless there's a good reason behind it, if it's this very wishy-washy, look, let's not upset them, they've had enough change and things like that.
Yep.
Then you're in limbo. You can't move this forward because they know then that they can always push back to leadership. Leadership will just acquiesce, and it's very, very difficult. So anybody that's watching this, if you're a product leader, if you're a business leader, if you're going to invest in product operations, you have to invest in it and you have to support it ongoing. You have to believe that actually there is a long-term aim here to say, we want to improve, and it may bring with it some short-term pain, and we need to get through that. And without that, your product ops teams, people, your function will just fail.
I love it. Just so critical to have executive support, strong executive support throughout, especially as you're rolling it out. That makes sense. Okay, last one. What advice would you give someone who's trying to move laterally into a product ops role from somewhere else in the business?
From somewhere else in the business, I would say, product ops, as I think I've certainly already said, is a very, very people-orientated role. It's actually not really that orientated around any technology, the products that your company builds. In fact, actually, I don't care what products the companies that I work for build, because actually I have very little to do with them. I understand them. I want to understand them. I want to be more involved in them, but it doesn't make a great deal of difference, because actually we're so internally focused on how are we doing those things. That's what's important. So if you're interested in doing that, you want to really be focused on your communication ability, your empathy, your ability to listen, your ability to understand the problems that people have in their job as it is right now. What are the bottlenecks? What are the limitations of what you can achieve with the technology that you've already got? What are the common grumbles that people are having about the way that something works right now, or the way that product team is doing X, Y, and Z, or how the product team are upset with how the rest of the business is working as well. I think as well, a good understanding of the people, having a good understanding of how your business works as well. But if you are moving internally, look, the unsavory reality is like every business has politics. There are certain characters that always get their way, certain characters that will throw their toys out of the pram. Understand them, understand how you navigate those individuals, those problems. If you've been there a while, you almost certainly will know how to interact and even deal with those people. And I've worked with some fantastic people like that over the years. Ones that throw their toys out the pram for whatever reason, and exactly how to approach them in different situations. Mm-hmm. Again, this comes back down to it being about people, it being about change, it being about embedding habits in people. And I would say as well, if this is something you're trying to pitch as well, yourself, and this is exactly the same if you're trying to move into product operations from outside the business. You're in a different role right now. Look at those skills that you have that meet that area, and focus on those. You don't have to have been a product manager to do great in product ops. Look, there's no getting around it. It is easier. There seems to be a very natural stepping stone towards that. I did it for 10 years, and there's a lot I've learned and brought with me from that. But you know what? There are so many skills in terms of project management, business analysis, even things like HR, even things like support roles, sales support roles, things like that. We've spoken already, other ops type roles around the business. But they all have skills that could really works well in terms of how you work with people, how you set process up, how you embed that, how you work on change management with people, how you write good good stories, good documentation, good uplifting and positive ways that this is the changes you're going to make are going to improve the business. Those are the sorts of things that are important. They are important ingrained skills. They are all soft skills as well. And so if you have those, or you are really wanting to work on those, fantastic. That's going to be something to focus on in pitching yourself for product operations.
I feel like there's a lot of good nuggets in there for moving into product ops, as well as just a lot of good nuggets for having a successful career in any organization. So that's great. I really appreciate it, Graham. And I think that's as good a spot as any to wrap things up. Again, really appreciate the time today. I've loved collaborating with you on the playbook. One more plug for that for those watching. You can grab that at launchnotes.com/playbook. It's a free download, and would love for you to, if anything that you heard today is interesting, there's a heck of a lot more in the ebook on these topics and much else. So would love for you to check it out. Would love for you to give us your feedback. And at least for the time being, we are offering at the end of the playbook, Graham is graciously offering to do 30-minute consultations with anyone if there's a specific topic or you want to chat about product ops in your organization. So please do that. Graham, before we part ways here, I know you are all over the place. I don't know how you have time to do it all. You've got a blog. You've got seems like you're on a podcast like this every day. I know you've got a newsletter, but where can folks find you and follow you and get more from that product ops guy?
Primarily LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn and talking about stuff, commenting on stuff. So LinkedIn is probably your primary place to find me. Come and connect with me. Come and say hello. And links to my newsletter, to the ebook, to some mental health projects that I'm involved with as well. You can find it all on there as well.
Fantastic. Yes, if you're anyone that's even remotely in the product or software world on LinkedIn, most likely you've seen Graham. He's a prolific LinkedIn poster, and it's always good stuff that I stop to read. So, Graham, thanks again for the time and the extra time today. Really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, look forward to V2 of the product ops playbook maybe
Yeah.
sometime next year. But
Yeah, love it.
thanks again, and we will be in touch.
Thank you, everybody.